The topic today is the impact of AI. And actually, my role's changed since the first slide. I've been doing cognitive advantage, which I'll talk a little bit more about as we go on. But I've taken on a broader role now around strategy and analytics, delivery excellence, which includes everything cognitive and everything to do with AI. And the idea here is that these things cannot be separated and that there's a broader picture and framework we need to think about. The one impact of AI that we've been really seeing a change in is at the boardroom and in the CXO suite. And it turns out that technology has largely been the responsibility of the CIO and the technology executive team to discuss and bring forward, but we now see more and more people taking part in that discussion. So the first impact of AI is people are saying the words, and it's reached a new level of boardroom interest and CXO suite interest. There are a couple of things going on in the market that I'd like to talk about as the slide builds, but three pillars that have been around for some time are, that we talked about last year when Bill Briggs was here, was digital, analytics, and cloud. And digital analytics and cloud are probably going on their fifth year of being big topics, and things we're getting very used to, but we feel that those are morphing into digital reality, cognitive, and blockchain, and I'll talk a little more about that. But two other things to point out is AI is impacting the technology stack and the kinds of projects we're doing. The core is becoming more important again. We've ignored the core in many of our businesses for a while, but as we start to put the AI and cognitive components around our core, we have to come back to the core, and in many cases we have AI and cognitive solutions driving a need to replace or upgrade the core. It doesn't mean replace it the way you might have done it in years past. It might be put the core in the cloud, use different providers, use third-party administrators, but really having to take care of the core again and build the business case is becoming a key thing that AI is impacting. And then the business of IT is being impacted by AI and these new technologies. The role of the CIO as an innovator, the role of the CIO as somebody who participates in the business case but doesn't necessarily own it. And then lastly, there's risk in the center. And what Bill Briggs likes to say when we go talk to clients is, if you don't begin with risk and compliance and security in the center as you strategize, plan, and implement, you'll be realizing the no in innovation. You'll quickly get shut down. So AI is really pushing that discussion up front because it involves so many components. So another build, we are thinking of this as a build. So digital was the web and mobile and many things that we're getting quite used to, and that's morphing into digital reality. Starting to think about the augmented reality, the virtual reality, the Internet of Things, and the many ways that we're delivering input and output to the human engagement. So digital is transforming, and we believe over the next 5 years, digital reality is going to take hold. Blockchain is a very overused word, or we're all trying to understand it and come up the curve. But blockchain is about an ecosystem of trust. And in the cloud, we've actually developed an ecosystem of trust. If you think about private clouds and public clouds and hybrid clouds, in the infrastructure and in cloud, we've been actually building that kind of trust, but at a very technical or infrastructure layer. So blockchain seems to us to be the next instantiation of that. And we need to start thinking about, as it takes hold, what are the various business models that blockchain might support. And then again, risk, I can't say enough about cyber and regulatory being up front and center in this discussion, or you'll get shut down. So a little bit about how we think about the elements of cognitive at Deloitte. And we think this is a really wide space. And we've been talking about artificial intelligence for many years. The thing about artificial intelligence is many components have been around, and some industries have used those components literally for 20 or 30 years. So we've broken this down into what we call cognitive, the elements of cognitive, or the cognitive advantage. And on the left, you see automation, which is very much about RPA, which many people are doing for the sake of automation, right? It's imitating or doing human actions. But what's happening now is we're starting to see intelligent automation take hold, adding the AI components and beginning to put some judgment into the automation solutions. So we think about RPA and the things that are getting bolted onto RPA as automation. Secondly, we've been thinking about insight, or cognitive insights. Lots of people have upgraded their infrastructures or built data lakes, and big data has been driving all kinds of exponential data, and also the availability of data. But the real question is, are we doing something with that? So cognitive insights for us are about realizing patterns, purposefully going out and looking for use cases around data, and changing that from backward-looking and reporting and BI and the things we've been doing to forward-looking, to think about the predictive models, to think about how to nudge people to make better management and leadership decisions, and to do that more in the moment. And then lastly, there's engagement. And a lot of this conference and Amelia is about engagement. That's one form of engagement with bots or virtual reality or IoT or things that are coming. But that's really the point of use and how we change the customer, the employee, or other experience to engage them in a different way and sort of unlock some horsepower and increase what we do at that point of engagement. So this together we call the cognitive advantage. So a little bit about the state of cognitive. We ran a survey last year, which we will repeat, and it was the state of cognitive. And in this survey, we went out to about 1,500 companies. We only really took the responses of about 300 people who knew what cognitive and AI meant. And we actually were surprised that the level of deployment of particular components like RPA, machine learning, natural language processing, were all in the 50% plus kind of range. And that was a lot more adoption than we thought might be out there for the companies that could spell cognitive. And it was only 2% that said they were doing nothing. So I guess the point here, as cognitive things become consumerized, as we see the Nest thermostat, the Alexa, Siri, and everything else we're used to interacting with, people are starting to dabble in these technologies, and they're starting to become more mainstream outside of financial services and outside of healthcare, where they had a toehold long ago. The second point in the survey is people who are doing more deployments are actually seeing better results. And we don't want to say doing more equals better results by itself. But what we found is the companies that actually put some structure around the cognitive journey are having better results, and they're starting to go faster. This complete survey is available if you just go to your favorite search engine. If you just put in State of Cognitive, Deloitte 2000 State of Cognitive, you can pick up the whole copy. It's a pretty interesting read. So we've talked about impact in the technology stack, impact in the market. One other thing that we like to think about is what's the impact to the workforce? And we've coined, or the term's been coined, what's the no-collar workforce? And really what this is about is the blending of technology, employees, traditional staffing models, right? Consultants, contractors. It's starting to bring others into that through the use of technology. And some of that's crowdsourcing. Some of it might be forming very special joint ventures, or even including freelancers. And the impact in this no-collar workforce is many-fold. And again, AI is driving this, not just because some of the applications that you can apply to this space are AI, but culture is an important point. Are you looking at your existing workers and developing a culture, or at least instantiating a culture that they understand? And I liken this to the shop floor workers now at General Motors and other places. They're very used to working besides automation and technology. So the question is, are you doing that traditional sort of change management to get ready? The second is around tech fluency. Again, if you think about those auto workers and others, they've gotten used to technology being around. They've also gotten more technically proficient. Some of their jobs involve interacting with those other technology components. So I like to think of this as everybody needs to be tech savvy to some degree in order to work in this environment. Can't just ignore it. The next is HR. It's HR for your traditional workforce. It's HR for your other non-traditional workforce components we talked about, but also for the machines. And I don't know if anyone's seen the article, but the French Labor Board was petitioned by the union representatives that they wanted to represent the robots that were being deployed in France. And that was a pretty interesting article. And then the real reason came out was that the French government actually pays the unions on a per head count basis to represent the employees in certain industries. So they saw this as a way to say, we're going to represent the robots and we're going to get some more money in our till. The other thing I'll tell you is this is affecting the no-collar workforce, your software licensing. Many of the software vendors are saying, hey, if a bot's more effective and can do more work per hour than a human, maybe we should charge more for your bot licenses than your human licenses. And I'm sure some of you have run into that. So there's a lot of HR for humans and machines, license management, people management, and I guess union management. The last is around cybersecurity, legal, and regulatory, right? You increase the aperture. This is not just moving data around within the company and locking it down. If you start crowdsourcing, you go through a whole other layer of what data, what processes, what intellectual property you're making available. And the implication here is quite interesting. And then I think there's ethical implications that we're starting to see. So Google recently put a virtual advisor out. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but she talked to her executive, and she said, I noticed you haven't had a haircut in a couple of weeks. You usually get one every 4. Would you like me to schedule a haircut for you? And in doing so, he said, sure, that would be great. Next week I'll be in town. She said, yeah, I know that already. I was looking at your calendar. And she called and actually bartered and did that whole transaction with the hair salon and never said she was a robot and got through the whole transaction, made the calendar entry, and it went flawlessly. So the whole ethical question is, what disclosure do we need as we start to integrate these technologies in Amelia's and others? And the other thing that was fascinating is it started to mimic some of the statements and ums and uhs and everything else that the person at the salon was saying. So there was personalization in there also. So these are some of the things to think about in the no-collar workforce. So I have a lot of examples of cognitive inaction, and since the last time we had somebody up here last year, we have some great examples in several industries, and I'll just briefly walk over those. In travel and hospitality, we are actually doing cognitive analytics and insights, and have actually produced nudging technology that's actually going out to the point of use, to the handheld devices in the planes, with suggested next actions, and also into the omni-channel. And 99% of the people, especially the high-value customers, love this. The other 1% thought it was creepy. So it's fairly fascinating, but it's actually increased their loyalty and increased their satisfaction. In manufacturing, we've launched a couple of different platforms we call cognitive spend. And cognitive spend is all about optimizing your supply chain. Thinking about how many different ways you might order 8.5 by 11 paper, or what it's called, and taking all the invoices, taking all the POs, taking some of the contracts, and actually mashing all that together in a very good ecosystem for optimizing. So that's working real well, and that involves NLP and text and speech and a whole bunch of different elements, and we've rolled that out pretty successfully at a bunch of clients. Public sector, we did some work with one of the state unemployment boards, and they had a lot of little fraud that added up to some big numbers. People misfiling their unemployment claims and that sort of thing. And in that particular case, we did behavioral analytics, and we actually looked at and asked people why they were doing some of the things they did at the moment of cheating or misanswering or that sort of thing. And we actually programmed those prompts back in, used some machine learning and tightened those up, and we actually are getting better behavior as people fill out their applications, look for work, et cetera. There's other examples here. I could go on, but you're starting to get the idea. And we'd be happy to talk about any of these in the interest of time. But things are starting to happen. I guess that's the key point here. So, just to wrap this up, so what the cognitive advantage looks like now, in automation, we're seeing transformative change. We're seeing automation coupled with AI, coupled with cognitive components driving flexibility and driving new competencies in the workforce, right? So we're sort of raising the bar on the human employees by automating the low-level things they were doing. And that's pretty cool. On insights, we're seeing new growth. We're seeing evidence-based decisions rather than gut-based decisions, and people starting to become the knowledge workers we always dreamed about. And we're seeing timely action, like what's going to happen rather than what happened. And then lastly, in engagement, we're seeing optimized behavior, a lot of what this conference is about, the next-gen experience, and ubiquitous engagement everywhere. And I think no vendor really covers this landscape completely. I think IPsoft has done a nice job in automation and insight with IP Center and has a really good base and core. But what's really exciting, I think they're well positioned on the engagement side. And there's different contenders out there, but I think they have a really good leg up on this. So with that, I'll end, and thank you for being back after lunch.